VAYNE is more of a crit AD carry than an on-hit AD carry because of, even despite the W? Well, it's not that crit's bad on VAYNE, but VAYNE actually has one more thing that makes on-hit incredibly potent on her in terms of her attack speed. Does anybody know what that is? So VAYNE's W obviously is very good with attack speed, but there's another thing on VAYNE in League of Legends that's very good with attack speed. Does anybody know what it is? Actually, I'm not going to ask because, you know, there's so many questions in chat, I don't want to load it up. It's her ultimate. VAYNE's ultimate gives AD, and the multiplicative stat to apply to AD is attack speed. Crit also applies with AD, of course, but one of the reasons that her ult is so good with attack speed, she's so good with attack speed, is her ultimate. The steroids on VAYNE's kit heavily synergize with attack speed, basically, as opposed to, you know, if you give someone, most other AD carries in League, they have attack speed steroids. They don't have AD steroids. And so when you give an AD carry attack speed steroid, they want to build AD. VAYNE's the opposite. We gave her a lot of AD steroids, or on hits, and so it makes her want to build attack speed. Doesn't mean crit's bad, but that's kind of the deal. Can you get rid of CS and just show gold? I feel like there's not reason to do that. There's no reason not to do it like in Wild Rift. So this is actually an interesting question. So the question is about information ambiguity, okay? So in League of Legends, you can't tell how much gold your opponent has. You can abstract it though, because in League of Legends, there's the kill count, there's the tower count, and there's CS as well. So you can tell how much gold your opponent has, you can tell how much gold you have, things like that. Comparatively, I think Wild Rift just tells you the gold. And then also games like Deadlock do this. So in Deadlock, if you're playing Deadlock, you know exactly how far behind you are. You know exactly how much total gold your opponents have. You know exactly how much gold each enemy has. You know everything. And you also know how much your allies have. So there's benefits and costs to that. One of the benefits is, of course, you just have complete information. And so when you see that guy, you can see exactly how strong he is. Kind of an obvious benefit, right? There are other issues though. Let's talk about some of the benefits of information obfuscation, especially in a multiplayer game. One of the benefits is your teammates won't flame you as much. Like literally, it's a lot easier to go after someone and call them a trash can if you can see their gold totals, because you can make direct comparisons. Another benefit is people won't give up and forfeit as much, because when you see an exact gold total, it's a lot easier to say, oh, we're never coming back. But the reality of a game like League of Legends is you can come back in a lot of games, even if you're very heavily down. And so by obfuscating gold totals, a lot of times players won't really recognize how far behind they are and how poorly they're doing. And that might be a good thing, because in a lot of games, even if you're doing poorly now, you could come back depending on how you play in the future. Right? And so by explicitly telling players you're down this much gold, that really puts it at the forefront of you should just forfeit right now, even if you actually shouldn't just forfeit right now. And so there's some toxicity and player interaction benefits from obfuscating these totals in terms of flaming teammates, feeling like you could never succeed against your character, your opponent, and people giving up. By obfuscating those values, you don't run into those problems. And then another thing with obfuscating values that can be good is the idea of variance. And what variance is just the kind of idea of you're going to try more things when you have incomplete information. And so one of the reasons, as an example, we don't like just showing you the timers of your opponent's summoner spells is that creates variance. And yes, there are these third-party apps that lets you track it, but like, if you don't know the exact cooldown of your opponent's spell, there is variance in terms of how you engage with them, because you're going to be making guesses, and sometimes those guesses will be right or wrong, and that creates just this whole string of different game outcomes that are generally really good to have when you want people to play a game for 1,000 hours like League of Legends. And so by obfuscating gold totals, when you see someone who's 4 kills up, you're not as likely to say, oh, I could never possibly beat that guy. You might instead say, well, yeah, he's strong, but I got this, right? And you could go in and you could try the fight and maybe you win, right? Or maybe you get crushed like I did against that Gwen I played against yesterday who was 6-1 while I was Viego was 3-2, and apparently 3-2 Viego is not nearly as good as 6-1 Gwen, and what am I doing with my life? Anyways, like, that variance and that obfuscation encourages players to interact with each other and not give up, basically, which I think is usually a good result. because you can beat someone who's 1,000 gold up on you. You can, like, that's not an impossible task depending on how the fights go. And so yeah, like TLDR, we obfuscate gold information to some degree to ensure a wider variance of experience and avoid situations where players will give up when they probably shouldn't, and instead allow players to, you know, make educated guesses about their status and their potential performance. Also, if you know how to code, you can do scary things. Like, so here's a fun story about Zelnath. This is a great story. So years and years and years ago, Zelnath worked at Riot Games, and I want to preface this statement with, we don't do this anymore, so don't go thinking that you can use this exploit. But at one point, Zelnath put something in the game that was testable. It was testable. It was like some cool thing, but we didn't want it to go to players. But he put it in the game, and so it went to live. And you could access it by typing a certain chat command into chat. And then you could, like, test this thing he put in. And it was on live. And they're just like, hey, guys, if you need to do this thing, just try this out. And it's like, that's sweet, but let's just hope players don't learn about this chat command. Do you remember what it was, Zelnath? It was Equalize? Was it Equalize? Is that what went live? Oh man, that's sweet. Okay, so what Equalize is we have this cheat for playtesting where when you type /equalize, the gold on the teams is equalized, and as well as the levels. And that makes it so if a game we're testing goes out of whack, where it's like, okay, it's 20-0, like that game's just supposed to end, but oftentimes we only have time for one playtest, so we'll want to get more feedback on things that we're testing, be it champions or items or systems. And so what we needed was a cheat to equalize the game. And so if you typed /equalize, it would take a game that had run away and it would make sure everybody was even. The supports would have the same amount of gold, the AD carries would have the same amount of gold, everything would be even and fair. Which, you know, probably isn't something players should do on live. So apparently there was a patch where that was on live, and if you knew the chat command to get it working, you could equalize the game you were on. Anyways, this was like a decade ago. It's not a thing. Don't worry, you can't do it now. But fun stories. Funny thing about Equalize is testing characters like Kayle. It made testing characters like Kayle impossible because Kayle would always eventually be equalized, and her weakness is that she's supposed to be losing the game most of the time. And so you could never really, it was really hard to tell if Kayle was broken or just getting equalized repeatedly, because she's supposed to be broken if she's actually even with you. But was built on the premise that she'd be behind most of the time.